How's it going, everybody? So in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about how being obsessed with your health, okay, what we can call hypochondria, orthorexia, or what I like to call these days, the nirvana of health syndrome. Even though this is a more pathogenic, more negative affecting version of the issue. Basically, people who they go down the rabbit hole of Dr. Google, or especially of YouTube health communities, Reddit health communities. Especially they start to follow these like charlatan people who fill your mind with crazy ideas about what might be causing your symptoms or whatever, and then have you do these like insane protocols like chugging berberine or going on raw vegan diets or doing crazy so-called cleanses, and they make you think that you have worms and shit like that. And some of the negative impacts that it can have. And this is actually me speaking from experience. I'm going to tell you all my stories and the reason why I'm so vocal about these crazy fucking charlatans nowadays, okay? And why it's so important that we get this freaking information out there, okay? So a long time ago, back in 2014, I was a youngin'. I was a I was a crazy motherfucker. I got into raw veganism, the parasite cleanses, and all that stuff, and I fully bought in, okay? And at the time, I had irritable bowel syndrome. I was basically shitting out plant foods and grains and stuff. And I also had some pretty severe skin issues, okay? Doctors diagnosed me with psoriasis after a certain point in time. But for a long time, you know, I was told that I had scabies and all this other shit, okay? And, of course, they gave me anti-parasite cream, Permethrin or whatever, to put on my skin. And that actually didn't help. It actually made it worse, okay? And I remember putting it on my skin and immediately having a panic attack afterwards, okay? So I also dealt with extreme panic disorder, where I was always having panic attacks. Little did I know I was actually causing my panic attacks, which is why I make videos on anxiety now, because I overcame the extreme panic attack disorder, and I realize how easy it is to solve. But the paradox is it's a simple fix in theory, but people are very resistant, and they view their anxiety as like a huge threat, which is exactly the cause, but also the reason why it's so hard to stop. Anyway, let's get to the meat and potatoes of this video, okay? I'm going to give some examples. I'll make a longer video later. I've actually got to go to jiu-jitsu in like 20 minutes. So, basically, one really hardcore example of how health anxiety can fuck you up is I had these really hardcore skin problems, and I couldn't breathe, and I had all these other weird issues. And I remember going to one of my friends, and he tried to explain to me it had something to do with my digestion and what I was eating and stuff. But I thought, well, the problem is, you know, on my skin. How could it be something inside me? You know, and he tried to explain to me my skin's my third organ or something like that. And all this other shit, right, that people say. Well, anyway, he convinced me to do that. It was whatever. So basically, I started to think I thought I had a bacterial infection on my skin at first, the very, very first. This was the very beginning. And I remember I bought antibacterial soap and all this shit, right? And so I remember just trying to scrub my skin with antibacterial soap because I was convinced I had a really bad bacterial infection on my skin. I thought I had a bad staph infection, all this other shit. And so I remember for days just like scrubbing my skin with antibacterial soap. Now, that sounds horrible to anyone with common sense, right? That sounds pretty bad. You can only imagine what happened next. My skin got way worse, okay? You know, what I later figured, so my skin got bad after a couple days of scrubbing with antibacterial soap. And eventually I got to this like place where I realized I was making it worse. So then I thought maybe it was something in my soap and all this other shit. And I had already thought about allergens and the detergent I was using and all this other shit. And then I was having an allergic reaction to that. But eventually I got to a point where I was just showering with water. And then eventually I just stopped showering altogether. And that's a long story, but that served a benefit for my anxiety. Realizing that no one cared that I didn't shower. No one even noticed, which is the crazy thing. And then eventually girls started to actually buy me soaps and shit like that. And girls started to like buy me new clothes and all this weird shit because they thought that I was like a caveman and needed help. And it's like the exact opposite of what most guys think about women. Most guys are like, oh, I gotta dress perfect. I gotta have a nice car. I've gotta like act like a gentleman. It's like, no. Actually, I found the least that I care, the least I, cared, the more and more girls started to care for me, which is really weird. But anyway, right? Like most guys aren't going to want to believe that at all. They can't accept that. They're like, no, I gotta be perfect. Disney told me. All right. Anyway, or like Andrew Tate in whatever stupid trendy bullshit. Anyway, so I stopped showering, and it actually the irritation went away from the antibacterial soap. But I actually got a new type of rash. It turns out I started to develop like a sweat rash because I wasn't like showering at a certain point. And I shower now, everyone. I shower like 3 times a day, give or take, because I train jujitsu and everything, and I work out a lot. So yeah, don't worry, I shower now. But I got to a point where like I'd actually developed like a sweat rash. Okay, so I started off with just like psoriasis or whatever that would develop. Later on, I figured out it was just a food issue. It was from the whole grains, beans, nuts, and seeds I was eating at the time. But I would get this food intolerance kind of response, the psoriasis from the foods I was intolerant to. And then I made it worse at first by like scrubbing the shit out of myself with antibacterial soap. And then I stopped showering and the irritation went away. The food intolerance psoriasis type rash was still there. But then I developed a sweat rash, okay? Eventually, some girl that I started dating, I don't want to say her name. This was a girl I dated for like maybe 3 months, give or take. She would force me to shower with her. And like... She was insisted that my rash was because I needed to wash myself better. And she started to actually wash myself for me. And she had these like organic soaps in her bathtub and all this shit. And she got me to stay with her at her house for a while. And I was able to work like remotely at the time. So yeah, I stayed at her house for like weeks on end, and she just took care of me. She bought me all the food and cooked for me. Well, I cooked for her actually, but she bought the food and I cooked. Because I'm a badass cook, and I was actually vegan at the time. So she washed me with all this like organic soap and shit, and the sweat rash went away. So my skin cleared up, and the sweat rash went away. But at the time, I was really into like veganism, and I believed meat was rotting in my intestine and all this other shit. And because on paper, you think that, you hear all this shit from Dr. Michael Greger and these other vegan experts, and especially the raw vegans. They take the schizophrenia to a new level. And I was following all these like these vegan people's advice, and they were like, yeah, if you have these rashes and autoimmune disease and shit, it's from the parasites from the eggs and shit you were eating. So you just got to go through the detox period, right? Well, I was detoxing a whole blender full of like salads out my fucking colon. It was horrible. And so it's like the first example of how health anxiety can fuck your ass up is how I was having a autoimmune reaction to whole grains, beans, nuts, and seeds. Because I was on a Mediterranean plant-based diet in 2013, and then I went full vegan in 2014 to 2015. I was having that autoimmune kind of psoriasis rash, and then I started to scrub myself with antibacterial soap in the beginning of 2014, and it made it worse. Then I just said, fuck that. I'm just going to not shower at all. And the irritation went away, but then I had a sweat rash. You know what I mean? And meanwhile, I was moving more and more towards a vegan diet until the end of 2000, like the mid 2014 to mid 2015. For a whole year, I was 100% vegan. And it was just interesting. The more I obsessed about my health condition, the worse and worse it got. Stopped showering, and it just like fucking created like a sweat rash, which is really bad. It was really itchy and just bad. And then the girl that actually there was actually three girls that for some reason started to try, I started date at different times, and they were trying to like, shower me and groom me and trying to help me, which is just very interesting. Until eventually one just started to like shower me. But then the problem is, and this was like in 2015, early 2015, I got her into veganism. So, when I let her just shower me, the sweat rash went away, obviously. She washed me with good soap and whatever, took care of me. Eventually, because she was vegan and all this shit, and she thought meat was bad and nasty and all this shit. Eventually, I realized, I drew a correlation. I'm like, wait a second. I notice every time I eat tomatoes, potatoes, I shit out the skins. I see lettuce and greens in the toilet, and especially whole grains, beans, nuts, and seeds. I'm like, so my irritable bowel syndrome is there, okay, basically, and I have these skin issues, and I noticed when I was raw vegan for like a couple weeks, and the digestion problems went away and the skin issues went away. And so I was like, I had its own bit of issues. So I was like, I wonder if it has something to do with like the fact that I seem to not be digesting a lot of these plant foods, right? So that was when I stopped eating those plant foods. Anytime I saw a plant food in the toilet, I stopped eating it. And so that was kind of hard as a vegan, because pretty much every main calorie source I was eating, again, beans, whole grains, beans, nuts and seeds, legumes, and then even like potato skins and stuff I was seeing in the toilet. So I'm like, well, what am I supposed to eat, right? And mind you, all those years that I was dealing with these problems, I was spending thousands of dollars on enzyme supplements, thousands of dollars on probiotics, like buying like the craziest probiotic supplements, the ones that are like, at the time 100 billion live units of probiotics was like $50 for 5 days. It was expensive back then. That was some big shit, right? And of course the science still isn't that great. And this was 7 years ago, back when there was hardly any evidence that probiotics had anything to do with anything. We didn't know what strains did what. And I was over there spending all this money on these digestive supplements because all these like doctors, Dr. Josh Axe, Dr. Mark Hyman, Dr. not McDougall, but whatever. I was following all of their advice, right? And then I was trending more towards John McDougall in the Starch Solution and Dr. Michael Greger and these vegan people. Anyway, none of the probiotics helped me. None of the enzyme supplements helped me. The parasite cleanses seemed to just make my digestion worse, probably because I was shitting out the rest of my bacterial flora. And then like trying to like mess with my actual skin didn't help, and it made it worse for a long time. Meanwhile, I was feeling weaker and weaker. Eventually, this went on for years, man. And this is why I just tell people, hey, just eliminate the foods that fuck you up and eat a lot of the foods that are full of nutrients and that are not refined and that give you the protein and the vitamins and minerals you need. Like, if you survive on freaking red meat alone and all your symptoms go away, why the hell are you going to try to force yourself to eat, like, rice and shit? You're like, oh, I'm not healthy unless I can force my body to digest this food that it's rejecting. It's like, when I realized I didn't need whole grains and stuff and I could just eat a paleo diet or whatever, That was when I found freedom. So anyway, around June or so of 2015, okay, after a year of being vegan, and at least 2 years of being almost entirely plant-based, I went paleo. I just ate lean red meat, or just lean meat in general, or just meat in general, actually. I would do whole organic chickens and shit like that. Well, I just did meat. I did broccoli, cauliflower, and then fruit, like bananas and like berries and shit like that. And I removed everything else. And next thing you know, all of my symptoms went away. My skin issues completely vanished. I was no longer dealing with chronic, extreme stomach issues. Shitting, I used to try to force myself to eat flax seeds and chia seeds because I read all these blog posts about how they're like the most nutrient dense foods possible. They have more calcium and more protein and all this shit than any food and all this other crap. Meanwhile, it didn't matter because I was just shitting them out undigested. And working with so many clients who have had the same issues as me, I have found time and time again that they're all falling down the same rabbit hole that I was. They're like, they have extreme digestive problems, and then we narrow it down to the handful of almonds they're eating in the evening and the chia seed smoothie they're eating in the morning for breakfast. They just remove those things, and next thing you know, all their symptoms go away, and they're like, they can't believe it. They're like, holy shit, there's no way. I've been dealing with these problems for 20 years. So the biggest enlightenment I've ever found was what most people think is healthy, especially in the mainstream health community. Healthy is a nebulous term. It doesn't mean anything. It's all about what foods are nourishing me and what foods are contributing towards my negative symptoms. So let's talk about another form of hypochondria, health anxiety, and shit that really fucks people up. And this happened to me too. So back in the day, again, I spent thousands of dollars on supplements. Okay. So when I first started, I was into genetic nutrient testing or whatever, where they test your genetics supposedly, and then they determine what vitamins you need. And I was on this entire protocol where I was taking certain B vitamins in crazy amounts, and a whole multivitamin supposedly designed to my genetic makeup, and all this other shit. And I was following a diet that was supposedly catered to my genetics, okay? And this is really popular now because everyone wants to be a special snowflake, and people forget we're all part of the same human species with minor variation in our evolutionary paths. Things like things like dairy and MTHFR genes are relevant. But anyway, I just remember constantly peeing like yellow, and I just felt always like I was super dehydrated and had headaches and couldn't sleep at night. Eventually, and I was taking these multivitamins and all that for a long time, and the damn genetic diet did not address my symptoms at all. I was still having the irritable bowel syndrome. Eventually, I found out that I stopped taking the multivitamin. Because I was paying like $100 a month for that bullshit. Eventually I found out, or I stopped taking the multivitamin and all the vitamins and minerals, the whole program that they told me to do because it wasn't working. Next thing you know, all those symptoms went away. And a lot of the symptoms that I was being treated for went away, or a lot of the problems it went away. Like, it turns out I was causing negative side effects from taking all these damn vitamins and shit that was supposedly catered to my genetic makeup. And I see people there, they do blood type diets and blood type supplements. They do genetic DNA testing and 23andMe, and then even things like hair analysis and blood mineral analysis and all this shit. And they do these programs, and it doesn't help them. But they're so bought into the nirvana of health, the idea of of being healthy and you know this, oh, it's science, and they're like really bought into the gimmick that the person's selling. Like, yeah, I got a naturopathic medicine degree, and they do all these lab tests and stuff that haven't been verified to work. And it's like, meanwhile, like, the results are not coming. The reality does not reflect the idea in your head. But you're so bought into the infatuation, the mental masturbation of the thing, that you fail to realize the actual health of the thing. And this happens in the biohacking community as well, where all these people are borderline anorexic. Like, they're super lean and they have abs and shit, especially on females. And then they lose their period or their testosterone's low. You notice a lot of these biohacking fuckers, they're on TRT or they're doing, you know, they're obsessed with testosterone. It's because they do intermittent fast. Like, okay, intermittent fasting's okay, but they're on these heavily calorically restricted protocols. A lot of them restrict protein and do a variety of other things that negatively impact hormones. And by the way, fasting's not bad for hormones, and neither is keto per se. Some might disagree with me, but it's the calories that seem to be the factor here. But a lot of these motherfuckers, they don't eat enough food. They don't eat enough of protein because they have to have it grass-fed. So they eat less protein, but they pay double the price for the higher quality shit. When in reality, their health would be better if they just ate enough fucking protein, enough food, and it didn't matter about the fucking quality. A lot of these people, they buy these like fucking green supplements. These damn like green powders, super green powders. Bro, that shit probably is not doing anything for your health at all. But maybe, right? People, they say they feel better, so whatever. Athletic greens and shit like that. It's like, spend more money on your actual fucking food. Like, I see people who are like, yeah, athletic greens and shit. And I see first of all, they're skinny fat, usually. They don't have any real measurable metric of health outside of their damn wearable tech, like their not their Fitbits, their Whoops, right? And they're like, oh, my heart rate variability and this and that. They're obsessed with that shit. They don't have any actual measurable metric of their health. So they think they're being healthy because of all the extra shit that they're doing on the side, but they don't have blood tests and this and that. And usually the blood tests say something different. In general, how do they feel is a real question. But what I'm getting at, though, is I found a lot of times, like a lot of the clients I've had, they're taking all these fucking supplements, and I ask them why, and they're like, well, because a multivitamin insurance policy, blah, blah, blah. And then I have them remove it, and all of a sudden, a lot of these problems that they thought were normal or caused by other things go away. Like, some people take multivitamins, like, for their entire fucking life, and they remove it, and they realize they feel way fucking better. So, to put the icing on the cap with a lot of this stuff, so first of all, the vitamins and supplements, there's a book called Vitamania by a woman named Catherine Price. And it basically just talks about how vitamin and mineral supplementation was never known, was never even needed until we started to refine food in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And then we found that when, people ate mostly white rice, for example, they started to develop B vitamin deficiencies. And these would completely go away if they just ate brown rice. So they started fortifying the refined foods with the vitamins that we found would we be deficient in if we ate a lot of them or whatever, right? And so most of the studies on vitamin supplementation only show a benefit when you're eating mostly refined foods. And this idea that we have like an essential recommended daily intake every day is not even valid. Because there's people who eat nothing but red meat for decades now. Not to say that's optimal or a good way to go, but they don't develop scurvy, they don't develop any deficiencies at all, except for maybe minerals at first, but eventually their body adapts, the kidney adapts to retain more salt and stuff without supplementation. So there's that. And yeah, these fuckers on an all potato diet, and they eat nothing but mostly potatoes for a long ass time, and they don't supplement anything. They develop B12 deficiency eventually. And that's about it. So anyway, and not to say that's healthy either, obviously. So anyway, there's a lot of other things too, like, a lot of people that they get into this whole like protein restriction thing because they think that eating too much protein will cause cancer or whatever. people do intermittent fasting to try to extend their lifespan, those are usually the people that develop hormone problems, energy problems, and stuff like that, unless they eat enough calories or enough protein in their eating window. And I'm not saying fasting is bad, but like most people, they do it for the wrong reasons. They're like, I want to extend my lifespan and I want to do this and that. And they're more infatuated with the idea of intermittent fasting rather than the actual results. Like people who are already under 13% body fat, like men, right? Men that are under 13% body fat and females are under 20% body fat. And they're doing intermittent fasting to try to extend their lifespan. And it's like, if you lose any more body fat than that, you're starting to dip into something called REDS, which is Relative Energy Expenditure Deficit Syndrome or whatever. And that's basically where you're not eating enough calories to even sustain your basal metabolic rate, let alone your actual activity levels. Because when you dip under a certain body fat percentage, the amount of calories you eat on a daily basis, even if you have body fat on your body now, actually does affect your energy output and the amount of energy that you can expend on a day-to-day basis. So most people really just want to feel good. They want to prevent disease or reverse certain diseases that they already have, and relieve certain symptoms of things like autoimmune disorders, and they want to feel good and have good well-being. Nowhere in any of that does vitamin and mineral supplements vitamin supplements have a lot to do with it, outside of if you actually do a vitamin test and you find you are deficient in a vitamin. But other than that, you're oftentimes just going to hinder your well-being, and most of the science actually shows supplementation without a diagnosed deficiency can actually contribute towards cancer and all sorts of things. So I'm going to make more in-depth videos on all of this in the future, have more examples and shit like that, because I got to get out of here to open mat. But I just want for y'all to think about this, okay? Like, people want to sell fucking supplements, and there's a lot of people that just are really gung-ho about things that don't really make a huge difference. My channel, when I recommend things, is for a purpose. When I talk about rhodiola, reishi mushroom, fucking cordyceps, or any of these things, these are things that, number one, you can feel right away. You know if it's helping you or hurting you. Number two, there's published literature on most of these things. There's thousands of years of research on these things, and it's not like some nebulous thing where you're like, oh, I'm supplementing with athletic greens because it's supposed to be healthy and it might do something. This is like, no, it actually modifies dopamine and does this and that, and it's like, yeah. So, anyway. Yeah. All right, hopefully this helps. Talk to y'all next time.